Okay, so this video is about heart structure, and to help me I've got my little model heart. So the most noticeable thing I think about the heart is that it's got this big sort of chunky bit down here. These are actually the ventricles, and you can see that there are blood vessels running through. These are the blood vessels that feed the heart muscle oxygen and glucose so that the muscle can contract. So the heart itself is made entirely of muscle with blood vessels running through it. This red one down here is the coronary artery, and its job is to provide the heart muscle with oxygen and glucose. We've then got these sort of two, and when you see it in the heart dissection, you'll see there's two little sort of wrinkly ear-shaped parts up here. These are the atria, and then we can see on our model, although not necessarily on your heart dissection, lots of pipes feeding in and out of the heart. The one with the big arch on it, with three blood vessels coming out there going up towards the head, that's the aorta, and the other ones will have a bit more of a look at when we get inside the heart. So if I take the heart apart, we can see some of the structures inside of the heart, and I can do the pen really. Okay, so these top two chambers, very thin muscular walls. The heart, you know, acts as a pump. These two top chambers are called the atria, and they're very thin walled because the only place that they're pushing that blood to is down into the ventricles. So the job of the muscular wall of the atrium is to contract, increasing the pressure inside the atrium until it gets above that in the ventricles, and to push the blood down into the ventricles. The main pump of the heart then is in the ventricle. I'm just going to ditch this half of the heart. So the ventricles, all of this tissue here is all muscle. The right hand side of the heart has a much thinner muscle. That's because really it's only pumping blood up to the lungs. So the lungs aren't very far away from the heart. It doesn't have very far to go, so you don't need to make a massive amount of pressure inside the ventricle to get the blood to go that far. The left hand side much thicker, and that's because you need far more contraction to raise the pressure a lot more, because the blood's just got a lot further to go. It's got to go all the way around the body. So coming into the atria we have veins. So on the right hand side of the heart, this blood on the right hand side is going to be going up to the lungs to collect oxygen. So this is receiving deoxygenated blood from the body and from the head through the vena cava. And you can see, I don't know whether you can see that actually, oh yeah. We've got the inferior vena cava from the body, and at the top we've got the superior vena cava, bringing blood down, deoxygenated blood down from the head into the right atrium. On the left hand side we've got this is blood coming from the lungs full of oxygen, so we've got the pulmonary arteries, veins coming in, feeding into the atria. So these are bringing blood back from the lungs packed out with oxygen into the atria. The atria, as I said earlier, their job is to contract and fill the ventricles fully. And they're going through these structures here, which are jointly called the atrioventricular valves. That's because they're located between the atria and the ventricles. When they're open, blood can flow through into the ventricles, and their job is, when the ventricles contract, to close because of the high pressure here being higher than the atria, and prevent backflow. So when the ventricles contract, they kind of push the valve closed so that the blood doesn't flow backwards into the atria. You'll also see this one being on the left hand side being called the mitral or bicuspid valve, and the one on the right being called the tricuspid valve. Now that's quite easy to remember because we always try to be right, and the tricuspid valve has 3 flaps. So as the pressure increases in the ventricle, it's going to push on those and push those flaps shut. Now because it's a pushing force, you also need something to stop that valve turning inside out, and those are these structures here which are called the chordae tendineae, and they're attached to the heart wall, and their only job is to prevent the valve flapping both ways, if you like. So when the ventricles contract, first of all, these valves are going to close to prevent backflow, and then the pressure is going to go so high that it will push the blood up and out of the arteries. So the artery from the right hand side of the heart is the pulmonary artery going to the lungs, and the vessel on the left hand side of the heart is the aorta. That's your main artery. It goes right down the centre of the body and has lots of branches off to all of your organs. Again, because the ventricle is effectively contracting but then relaxing, so the pressure is going up as it contracts and going down as it relaxes, we need some valves to prevent the flow of blood backwards into the ventricles. So here at the base of each of the arteries, and trying to see whether you can see that. There. The base of the arteries, we've got these semilunar valves. So the one in the pulmonary artery, so jointly you can call them semilunar valves. The one in the base of the pulmonary artery is the pulmonary valve, and then you can see this one here. This is the aortic valve, and there's of course the entertaining song on YouTube, isn't there, with the guy going about the aortic valve closing. So when the ventricles relax and the pressure falls in the ventricles, the pressure in the arteries is going to be higher, and the blood's going to fall back towards the ventricles, and it's going to fill up these little pockets in the semilunar valves and close the valve. And it's the valves closing that make the lub-dub sound of the heart. So lub is ventricles start to contract, push those valves shut, lub. Ventricles relax, blood falls back into the semilunar pockets, dub shuts them. And the only other bit I think that you need to know about the heart is this bit here. This is the separation of the 2 halves of the heart. So remember, we've got double circulation, it's a 2-pump system, right hand side to the pulmonary circulation, left hand side to the body, and this bit down the middle is called the septum. Now this is actually quite important for heart contraction because it contains a bundle of specialised muscle fibres that transmit a wave of excitation to start that muscle contraction all the way down to the apex. So I will do a separate video on this, but just for your information, located in the right atrium is a little bundle of specialised muscle fibres called the sinoatrial node. You'll also see that called the pacemaker of the heart. This actually initiates a wave of excitation. We don't call it an impulse because it's not going through a nerve, it's going through specialised muscle cells. So it initiates a wave of excitation that spreads out across, I'll just put the heart back together for a second, across both atria, and it causes them to contract and push the blood through into the ventricles. Now obviously if that wave of excitation just went straight down from the atrial walls into the ventricle walls, the heart would contract down over, so it does something else. So up at the top, sort of the junction of the atria and ventricles, we've got a different node called the atrioventricular node. Its job is to collect that wave of excitation and send it down bundle fibres called the bundle of His down to the apex of the heart. That's the pointy bit. That wave of excitation then spreads up through the Purkinje fibres, So these are little branches coming off the bundle of His, so that the heart contracts from the bottom first, and then the wave of contraction moves upwards over the ventricles so that the blood is pushed upwards and out into the arteries at the top of the heart. So that's kind of it for heart structure. So you need to know why the left hand side is bigger. You need to know the functions of the valves and the chordae tendineae. You need to be able to remember the names of the blood vessels, where they're going to. And when you get a diagram of the heart, the diagram could look like anything. Just trace the path of the blood through, so it's always going from the atria, so from the veins into the atria, into the ventricles, out through the arteries. So it's kind of coming in, going down, going up, coming in, going down, going up. Okay, hope that helps.